All right, let's dive right in. We're living in this wild time where it's getting tougher and tougher to tell where an idea is actually coming from. Was that written by a human expert, an AI, or more and more likely, some combination of the two? So today, we're going to break down a really powerful framework for judging ideas on their own merit, not on their source. It's called agnostic messaging. So let's start with a problem that's, well, it's a very human problem. We are absolutely obsessed with the messenger. We spend so much mental energy trying to figure out who is talking that we often forget to really listen to what they're saying. And in this new age of AI, that instinct, it's becoming a serious problem.
So let me just ask you this, right? Imagine you get two arguments that are completely identical. One comes from a famous professor with all the credentials in the world, and the other comes from a super advanced AI. Which one do you instinctively trust more? And which one makes you more skeptical? And that right there, that gut feeling, that's exactly the bias we're going to be digging into.
And this chart, it just breaks down those mental shortcuts perfectly. When we hear from a human expert, we lean into what's called credentialism. We see the PhD, we see the title, and we just trust them. But with an AI, we often have this knee-jerk dismissal reflex. We immediately start hunting for mistakes, for those so-called hallucinations. See what's happening? In both cases, we're not really judging the idea, we're judging the speaker.
And here's the crucial point. Trying to trace every single idea back to some purely human or purely machine origin, well, it's becoming a losing game. As humans and AI work together more and more, those lines are just blurring. Trying to track the sources, honestly, becoming a waste of time. We need a totally different way of thinking. And that brings us to the solution. It's this framework called agnostic messaging. Now, let's be clear. This isn't some revolutionary, brand new thing. Not at all. It's more like an essential skill, a discipline that we really need to dust off and get good at again for the world we're living in right now. At its core, agnostic messaging is actually pretty simple. It's the practice of intentionally separating an idea from whoever or whatever delivered it. You basically put the message into a kind of conceptual quarantine, totally free from any of the baggage or bias you might have about its source. This quote just nails the guiding principle. The only questions you should be asking are, is the logic sound? Does this argument actually hold up on its own 2 feet? And hey, is it useful? That's it, full stop. Who said it suddenly becomes way less important. You know, a really great way to think about this is like a blind taste test, but for ideas. When you don't know the brand of soda you're drinking, you can't rely on your old biases, right? You're forced to judge it purely on how it tastes. We need to start doing the exact same thing with the information we consume. So how do we actually do this? Well, it boils down to a pretty simple 3-step process. First, you isolate the core message. What's the actual claim being made here? Second, and this is the hard part, you have to consciously ignore the messenger. For a moment, it just doesn't matter who said it. And third, you scrutinize the logic. Does it make sense? Does it stand on its own? And when you do this, something really important happens. You're forced to shift your focus away from ethos, which is all about the speaker's character and credibility, and toward logos, which is the pure internal logic of the argument itself. You have to engage with the substance, not the packaging. Okay, but, and this is a big but, we have to be really clear here. This framework is not some absolute rule. Look, it would be pretty foolish to just ignore the source in every single situation. There are definitely critical times when knowing who is speaking is not just important, it's absolutely non-negotiable. And here are the big ones. First up, accountability and liability. Think about law or medicine. The source has to be responsible. Second, safety-critical information. Like the blueprints for a bridge. You have to verify that source. Third, you need the source to understand intent. Is this person trying to educate me or manipulate me? And finally, if a message is a direct order telling people what to do, you absolutely have to trust the source.
So the key thing to remember is that agnostic messaging is an intellectual tool. It's something for your mental toolkit to help you evaluate ideas and arguments. It is not a universal dogma that you apply blindly to everything, especially when real-world actions and consequences are involved.
So, what's the whole point of all this? Why does this even matter? At the end of the day, it's about trying to get past all the noise of the messenger so we can find what you might call the pure signal, the actual truth inside the message. That pure signal is really the substance of an idea. It's that valid insight, that logical connection that is true no matter who says it.
If an idea is solid, its value is still there, whether a person or an AI came up with it. The messenger is just the delivery system. The signal is what actually matters.
And this all brings us to one last, really crucial distinction. Our brains are literally hardwired to focus on the messenger. It's a deep social instinct that, for our ancestors, was a survival skill. It helped them figure out who to trust in their tribe. But in our world today, that same instinct can be a real weakness. Moving past it to really focus on the message itself, well, that's not natural. It's an intellectual discipline. It's a skill that we have to consciously practice and build up if we want to think clearly in this century.
So I'll just leave you with this to chew on. If a concept is logical, if it's coherent, if it's genuinely useful, if it just plain makes sense, how much should where it came from really matter to whether or not it's true?